Welcome to the Leaderish Podcast with your hosts, Regina and Doris. Hey, Doris, how's it going?
Hey, Regina, it is fantastic. How are you?
I am doing great as well, as per the usually in a pretty good mood. But today I'm even more excited because we're continuing our conversation with Lauren Kiproff-Downer, who I met at an ATD conference. Our last episode, she joined us to talk about culture, and this is a two-part series. So if you haven't checked out that first episode or our last episode on culture with Lauren, you may want to go back to check on that and listen to it, although definitely not necessary. You're still going to get a lot out of this episode. And today we're going to, instead of focusing on culture, we're going to focus on the climate. So how do you figure out where your culture is at? And Lauren's going to take us through some new tips and some techniques for leaders as they're figuring out their climate. So, Lauren, you want to do another brief introduction of yourself in case we've got some folks who didn't listen to the culture episode?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Hi, Regina. Hi, Doris. My name's Lauren Kiproff-Downer. I am an organizational development consultant, master's level organizational psychologist, big passionate nerd about anything related to organizational culture, engagement, the kind of things that create the kind of dynamics in a workplace where people can feel valued and nurtured and feel like they are where they're going to be able to thrive professionally. And it's just such a joy to get to talk about all of that. And it's a joy to be here. Like Regina said, I was fortunate enough to speak at the Nashville chapter ATD conference, which is this organization for talent development. I was chatting about organizational culture and organizational climate, which is something we're going to be delving into. Understanding what your culture should be, understanding what that might look like, and then getting a better idea about how it currently is, what's the ideal, what's the reality. And I was fortunate enough to get to chat with Regina after I spoke, and she told me about the podcast, and I just was delighted and said yes so quickly when she asked if I'd be interested in hopping on and getting to share with all of you a little bit about these things that I care so much about and that can make such a difference for you and your team and meeting your people where they are so that you can make the great things happen that you're capable of making. So we got to chat a little bit about culture when we spoke. We're going to get into a bit of a part two about organizational climate. Regina, Doris, fire away any questions. Let's get started in our conversation.
Yeah. First of all, I was not lucky enough to hear you speak at the conference a few weeks ago. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say about climate today. I think that we had a really great conversation about culture on our last episode. And I think we've all heard the word culture many times. People feel like they either have a good culture or a bad culture, and maybe they don't even know exactly what that means. But maybe start with a little recap of what we talked about last time and then transition into what is climate exactly? What does that mean in an organization? And what can we do to make it the best organization possible when it comes to climate?
Absolutely. I joke that if you ask 20 different people in a room what organizational culture means to them, you're going to get 20 different definitions. You're going to have a couple of people looking at you confused, and then there are going to be a couple of people saying, well, I kind of think I know what it means, sort of, but it's hard to talk about, and there's a reason for that. It's the bedrock for success for an organization, but it can be a little bit ambiguous. The textbook definition, or one that I prefer for culture, is the attitudes and behaviors of employees within an organization. Think about culture as the personality of your organization or your team. It's the ideal that you're going for. Now, in contrast to that, if culture's personality, think about climate like the mood of your organization or your team. It refers to the overall atmosphere of a workplace, it's collective perceptions that employees have about their work environment. Y- Ideally, culture and climate should align. And when they do, it's fantastic. Climate should help you to understand how you're doing with those key aspects of culture that you're trying to keep an eye on. In the last time that we met, the last discussion, we talked a little bit about how culture can be something that's really important, but it can be difficult to measure. It's a little bit more ambiguous. Climate is something by contrast that is a little easier to measure. It's a little bit more tangible. It can give you insights about what's really going on with your team or with the company or whatever level you're looking at. It's more attitude based in the moment. How are they feeling? It's based on current perceptions. It's a little bit more shorter term. It's observable. It can change very quickly. And it can also really empower you where you are because it gives you insight to know what next steps you can take. Looking at climate, you can see, hey, this part of my culture is really strong and thriving. We can lean in here and keep that going, maintain it, or even build it up, make it even better. On the other side of it, it's still a great thing. Even when you see things that are going wrong, it's awesome because it gives you the opportunity to see something that you can positively do about whatever that thing may be that you need to focus on. Seeing that there might be a problem is a win in the making because it gives you the opportunity to meaningfully get started on doing something good about it and bringing good things for your team.
I love the point you made about something going wrong and viewing it as an opportunity. I think so many times we look at things in a negative light and we can only focus on the negative and how terrible that is. But I love the fact that we can look at it as an opportunity. I recently went through a program where it was all about looking at opportunities when things aren't going in the right direction and anything that happens in our lives that might be negative and that can be taken with an organization. There's always something positive we can look at from there. The question is, what are some methodologies that we can use to do that? So we see it's going in the wrong direction. What are some tools or resources that that an organization can use to try to right the ship if it's going in the wrong direction?
Absolutely. Great, great question. The first thing to be considering is how do you even know what's going on with your climate? There are obviously surveys and metrics and things that you can go out. There are a bunch of other people like me, organizational development consultants that could come in and help you. But to give you a starting point to look at, climate information might show up on your employee engagement surveys that you do
Mm.
regularly, focus group discussions that you might have with either your own team or cross functional members of organizations, performance feedback, stay surveys, exit surveys, retention trends across industries, things that can give you an idea what your bright spots are and maybe help you to put fresh eyes on areas where you might need a little bit of attention. Obviously, how you respond to that depends on a lot of things, what issue it is that you're seeing pop up, how big of an organization or team you've got, so you know how much you can feasibly be delving into and what might be practical there. But let's say that you're running into a challenge where people are maybe feeling like there is some siloing, or maybe they just don't feel like they're getting the communication that they need as well. That's an area where you can look and see, we feel like there's been a breakdown here. Maybe this manager is fairly new and leading a team, and they recognize, hey, maybe I'm struggling when it comes to how I'm sharing information. That might be an opportunity where you can go and talk to a more seasoned leader within your organization who is in a similar kind of people forward role and say, hey, what do you find effective if you're dealing with a hybrid work team? Or what ideas might you be finding that have been helpful? It might be a great time if you're in an organization that's big enough to make it sustainable and feasible. Maybe you pull together a peer mentorship group of leaders so that you have an opportunity to be talking to other people that are in similar roles and spaces with you that understand what you might be going through and can talk about challenges like that. Maybe you've already seen a little bit of that with something, and that's why you're turning to a great resource like this podcast to be able to be having a little bit more insight and thinking differently about how you can approach some of these challenges that you run into as leaders. The thing about it is, if you look from different angles, you can find solutions, but the awareness of climate can give you an opportunity to really dive into thinking critically about the situation and then leveraging your own leadership skills and your own thought processes, your network, your supports, maybe your HR team, maybe other people in your leadership to help you come up with positive, creative solutions to address those issues. My favorite, the one that always seems to matter the most, the one that's always going to be accessible. Hey, if your team's feeling like they're struggling with communication, maybe it's as simple as pulling them together and saying, hey, I want to be able to be there for you. I want to be able to meet you where you are. What could I be doing better? Phrase it in a very constructive way, kind of keep the energy towards doing good things, but having that conversation of what ideas do you have? What might you need from me to be able to make that more effective? And even doing that builds some trust in you. They're called justice factors, but it's a matter of the fairness of the way things are being done within a team or within an organization. And doing something like that, letting them see you seeking those answers based on you recognizing that there might be something in the climate that isn't working for them can give you a lot of opportunity to build that trust, empower them, and show them that you trust them to share ideas with you and start working towards solutions.
So, one of the things that you mentioned right after Doris asked that question was about doing focus groups. I'm going to add to that like one on one conversations. So, if we're thinking about a leader who is trying to figure out what their climate is on their team, you gave an example of if they know there's a problem with communication. But what are some of the questions that leader can ask to figure out what their climate is if they don't know in either that focus group or that one on one setting?
Sometimes it can even be a matter of looking at various aspects of team performance, not getting into necessarily like a performance review or a 360, but pulling data from HR about the challenges we're seeing, what might be that we're going to pull in and look at different aspects of our culture quarter to quarter and focus in on looking at different ways we can tighten various things up and just drill down on different pieces. I've had some organizations I've been involved with that have taken a couple of their points from a mission statement or from a value statement and just worked through maybe 2 or 3 a quarter to just look at their processes and just dive into, you know, letting those be areas of focus. Generally, if anything's too bad, it'll be something where it starts to pop up anyway, but you can be looking at if there have been any changes in the way people are responding. Maybe you're suddenly having people not show up for meetings the way they used to, or there's been some different energy and different enthusiasm about engaging in certain ways that hadn't necessarily been the way the team had responded previously, or after either team change or like a merger and acquisition situation. Those are good moments to just take a look at everything and just try to do a broad check in on the temperature in different directions to just see how people are feeling and being able to just ask. But there are a lot of instances where, as things might be escalating in that, if there are challenges, they're going to pop up fairly noticeably. I guarantee some of you that are listening right now, when we're talking about that, some particular aspect of your team dynamics and what they've been going through, is running through your head right now, that would probably be a good place to begin. It's just paying attention and listening and just making yourself present when it comes to the way your team's responding.
This reminds me of when you have a leader who is trying to figure out what the climate is on their team and maybe holding a team meeting with their team or even one on ones, maybe even asking questions like, as a team, what are we doing that we should continue doing? And you're looking for alignment there, right, with what you expect the culture to be on that team or the culture of the organization. What should we start doing that we're not doing currently would be another question to figure out where are we missing the boat with our culture. You're going to get a lot of data from that. And then what should we stop doing that doesn't
Right.
align with the culture that we're going for? I think that those might be three very helpful questions for leaders to check in, either one on one or in a team meeting setting, to figure out what their climate is on their team specifically, especially if they don't have access to maybe some of that HR data or they're just trying to get a feel for where the team is. What do you think about that?
I fully agree, but I will caution you if there are certain aspects, particularly in terms of trust, where you might be running into some challenges anyway. You may run into, especially early on in working through climate challenges or working towards future climate success, which is more the way I like to frame all of
I
it.
love it.
You may be in a situation where until they know they're safe and they know that they can really trust you to be doing good things with the information that they're sharing openly,
Mhm.
some of them may be a little hesitant to necessarily speak because you might run into some people that are worried about what are you actually going to do. Th- People that are in your team care about doing good work. If they didn't, they wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
But a lot of times there are people that if they're having concerns, they might not always feel safe saying, "Hey, Regina, I feel like we're having too much of a challenge in this thing," or, "Hey, we came through a merger and I had been part of the company that was purchased, and I don't feel like we have our identity anymore, and that's making me feel like I'm not valued." Some may come out and say that, but there might just be some that are sitting there looking at you quietly in the meeting, smiling and nodding and saying the right things, and then just sitting there going, "I don't trust any of this." So it's taking that moment to begin where you are, modeling your authenticity, showing that you care enough to be trying to keep an eye on what's going on with them so that you can be doing what you can do from your chair to be giving them the best work environment possible so that they can thrive.
So, what do you do if it's not working? I know there are organizations where they bring in, let's say, new people into the C-suite, and only one or two get along with this new person who's bringing in this whole, maybe it's not even a mergers and acquisition. It's just somebody bringing in a new, really a new culture or trying to bring in a new climate into the organization. And you might have one or two people that agree and are willing to listen and want to move in that direction. And you've got the other half of the team that are saying, oh, no, this isn't working at all. We don't even like this new person, and you've got this inner turmoil as a result of a new leader coming in trying to make these changes. That could be in a mergers and acquisition situation. It could also be in just bringing in one new person into a leadership role that doesn't really fit with the existing or current culture and is maybe trying to right this ship in his or her mind that doesn't need to be righted in the other people's minds.
That is such an important question and such a big part of getting a conversation like this right. And a lot of it can come down to transparency in the discussions about why the directions are happening, sharing your vision or that person's vision about how they can be important to that bigger picture, how they can be part of defining the direction going forward. When you run into those people closing off, A lot of times it's a, "Hey, this information hasn't been shared with the," and obviously you can't share everything. We all understand that. We're all adults on the call. We know that when it comes to some things, there's not every detail you can always be totally transparent about, but you can share enough where it feels like a fair and authentic kind of understanding of the direction that we're taking and let them feel like they're a part of the bigger picture of where we're going instead of it just being, "Hey, this person got hired. They've been here 30 seconds. They don't understand how we do what we do. They don't understand how this community works. They haven't been in it with us in the trenches trying to do the things that we've done to get us here." And then they're going to suddenly be sitting in this corner office dictating our direction in our lives. We talked about expectations and balancing those gaps before on our last discussion. And it's just important that you, as a leader, recognizing that there may be this disconnect, is a voice expressing the need to make sure that we're sharing in a fair and authentic way enough understanding of the changes that are happening so they don't just feel like their entire world is shifted from Friday to Monday when they got back to their desk and now it's just a totally different world, and they're just supposed to go forward with it. Because from a fairness and justice factor standpoint, if you're not being straightforward with people about what's going on, and it's suddenly just happening to them instead of them being part of the steps forward that you're taking together, they're gonna push back on it, and understandably so, anybody would with that information, and it's a valid thing, and responding to some of those concerns and challenges with empathy and showing the recognition and appreciation for them as part of where we've been and part of where we're going can be really important to show that you value what they've put in and who they are and that their seat at the table will continue to be a thing. And then it's just being patient. They'll figure it out, and there may be a few that figure out it's not the right bus for them anymore, and at that point, give them all the support in the world and wish them well, but you've done it the right way and given them the opportunity to be able to really understand what's happening and have done it in a way showing respect for their contributions.
You
Doris,
said something important there. You said recognizing the disconnect, but sometimes that new leader comes in, and I hate to use the word bully, but almost comes in saying, "No, this is the way. I am the new CEO of this organization because it wasn't going in the right direction, so I'm going to change everything." But that new CEO doesn't recognize the disconnect and that it can't be done quickly. That CEO needs to have those conversations, whether it's one-on-one or with team leaders or in some other aspect to try to, let's say, right the ship or move it in a better direction, but doing so patiently, as you say. And how do we encourage the bully or that person that doesn't really want to listen? How do we encourage that person to listen?
It may be a situation when somebody's going through their own onboarding process into that new company of saying, "Hey, there's a very rich tradition, a very rich culture that you're coming into that they are very loyal to because a lot of these people have been a part of this for a long time, and they're going to get behind your leadership when they see that you're doing what you need to do for the company, but until they see that, they're going to be wary." So I do work with workplace bullying in a lot of ways. There's a very rare situation where you just have people who are carrying some issues that might make them not the best options for leadership over human people. But in a lot of situations with the right vision and right opportunity for understanding, that person is just misdirecting their energy and their leadership in a way that's being perceived maybe not the best by the people that they're coming in with. And that might just be a matter of having the leaders that would be present in other upper level situations, maybe other C suite people or those that have been in authority to come alongside this person and say, look, they're going to get behind you, but you have to make sure that you are hearing them, that you're showing them the respect and regard that they deserve, that you're making it clear that they're part of this instead of it just being whatever push. And that can be a delicate conversation, and it's not always going to be something that it's uncomfortable. Any of us that have had to be in those moments of having to walk through those tightrope kind of moments know it can be a very challenging thing, but having the respect and trust of the leader that you've chosen to say, hey, as part of your transition strategy, this is something you're going to have to take on, and you can't just bulldoze these people because if you try to, they're all going to leave and they're great, and we don't want them running to our competitors. We don't want them burning out and leaving our work in general. That's going to take some initiative on the part of people that are helping that person to plan their transition into that role. And honestly, if they're the right leader for that, they're going to be likely to listen and say, okay, hey, obviously, I want to make sure I'm meeting these people where they are and building trust and doing the work that you need to do.
Wow, that was excellent. So, really, a lot of figuring out climate, even at an organizational or a team level, either one, really comes down to trust. There has to be a level of trust there. There has to be a commitment to engage and recognize your employees. And there has to be some safety there to have those really difficult conversations. So, before you can have those conversations, you have to be able to evaluate if you have the safety to have those conversations so you can really
Absolutely.
figure out what the climate is.
Precisely. I am applauding you so loudly right.
I get applause from you. This is amazing. Yeah. I get these like quiet applause. It's so much fun. I love it.
And again, that can be easier said than done, not to generate my applause. I get excited about everything related to this podcast. But when it comes to being able to build that trust, you might have a culture that says trust. You might have trust written up on your wall. But if you're having certain decisions made and you have a room full of people with their arms crossed staring up at the front at the facilitator going, I don't believe a word coming out of your mouth, that's when you need to be looking at climate. And that's when you need to be working through those
This
efforts.
reminds me of an anecdote that you shared at the conference that we were in. And it was the organization's vision statement or mission statement. It was something about risk taking, but they were firing people who made mistakes. And that
Precisely.
created a climate of we don't take risks. It says it on the wall, but we get penalized if we do take risks. So therefore, we don't take risks,
Yeah,
even though it's on the
exactly.
wall.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so it's just making sure, even looking at your own decisions, your own way of responding to things, if you want that safety and that trust to be what you're about, then make sure that the way that you're responding is supporting the kind of space that will allow people to take those steps forward and be secure in doing it and knowing that they're not going to get booted out the door if they're doing what you're telling them to do on the wall.
Yeah. That's great. Let's wrap this up and go through some of our big lessons learned. Doris, as usual, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I learned the difference between culture and climate, and I thought that was really important, that culture is the bedrock. It can be ambiguous, where climate is more of the personality or the mood of the organization. And when I thought mood, I thought a moody teenager. So a moody teenager that can change a little bit more frequently, where the culture of the organization or the family might be more, like you said, the bedrock of that organization. And the other thing that I thought was really important, this might be my favorite part, is taking those values. So the mission is going to be an overall mission statement but the values are probably 1 through 5. These are the values of the organization. And if they're not working, if something is broken, to take that, and I think we just gave a great example of risk taking, and that we work on that on a quarterly basis. So if trust has been blown because we aren't taking risks, even though it says it on the wall, but we're not taking it because people are getting laid off, or being let go, well, let's work on this quarter. We're going to work on risk taking. And we need to understand all of the dynamics of risk taking or whatever that thing we're working on and really work on it very heavily so that we can go back to a culture of, yes, this really is who we are. And in this example, risk taking. So maybe after we work through all this, the following quarter, all of a sudden people are willing to take those risks. And the organization isn't going to let people go because those risks don't pay off for the organization.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Regina,
and
how about you?
yeah, so to go back to one of the things you had asked a great question, Doris, around the tools that you can use to figure out your climate. And Lauren brought up employee engagement surveys, and I'd say 90% of companies do some sort of yearly engagement survey. And
Mhm.
I think that, and this was an aha for me, I think that most leaders don't know how to leverage the data that they receive to figure out the climate of their team. And while this wasn't discussed, I think I have an idea of how to do that. And I think that looks something like, as a leader, list out what you want your culture to be on your team, then figure out the corresponding question or questions that will give you insight into that, and then review your data and those questions specifically that were asked to figure out if your climate is where you want it to be. And if not, you start building that trust and you start doing those micro behaviors that will build the trust, build the safety, so that you can have the conversations, the deep conversations to figure out where your climate is today and what you need to do to move forward to change that.
Brilliant. Precisely.
So that was a lot of fun. That all clicked as we were going through that. There was just a lot of little clicks that happened there. So I think that's a nice fine tip to put on there. All right, that is about all the time that we have for today. So we'd love to hear from you. All of our links are found in the show notes. You can find all of Lauren's information, Regina and Doris's, all right there. You can follow us on this journey as we delve into all things leadership. We would love a review. You've probably heard it before if this is not your first episode, but all of our comments got wiped away and we have no idea how. So if you will please leave us a 5-star review and comment, that helps with the algorithm so that we can get in front of new and amazing leaders. And we would be forever grateful for that. If you're interested in being a guest on our podcast and you have an engaging topic, please reach out to leaderishpodcast@gmail.com with your desired topic and some information on how we can stalk you. And we'll follow up with you, meet with you, and give a good talk through about your topic. So, with that, ladies, great conversation today. Cheers.
Cheers.